The night had been ordinary, or at least it was supposed to be. I sat across from my 15-year-old son, Daniel, in the dim light of our dining room. The roast chicken steamed between us, the golden skin crisped perfectly in the oven, its aroma mixed with rosemary and butter. For once, he wasn't glued to his phone, and that alone felt like a small victory. His shoulders were loose, his eyes bright, his voice full of the kind of enthusiasm he usually reserved for his friends. We were talking about his science project, the homemade volcano he wanted to perfect before the fair next week, and the sound of his fork scraping against the plate blended with the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind me. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, more out of habit than curiosity, expecting a harmless calendar notification or some retailer's late-night spam message. But what I saw froze the air in my lungs before I could even exhale. "Get up. Leave now. Don't say anything to your son." The words glared at me in stark white text against the black screen. No name, no explanation, no number I recognized. Just the command, bare and urgent, like someone whispering in my ear from a shadow I couldn't see. My pulse hammered in my throat, so violently I thought Daniel might notice the tremor in my neck. I set the phone face down on the table, the ceramic plate beneath my hands suddenly slick with sweat from my palms. I forced myself to look at him, to anchor myself in the sight of his messy brown hair falling across his forehead, the small smear of gravy he hadn't noticed near his mouth. He was mid-sentence, animatedly describing the chain reaction of baking soda and vinegar, his hands slicing the air in exaggerated gestures. He didn't see my fork wobble and fall against the edge of the plate. He didn't notice how badly I wanted to gasp for air. I tried to act normal, scooping peas onto my fork and dragging them across the plate, as though they demanded all of my attention. But the fork felt too heavy, my grip too clumsy. The peas rolled away, tumbling noiselessly back into the pile. I placed the utensil down before it clattered from my trembling fingers. My mind spun in frantic circles. Do I ask him to get up? Do I smile, pretend, buy time? Or do I freeze, hoping that ignoring the message will make it meaningless, just another cruel trick of the world? But the text felt too pointed, too sharp in its simplicity. Whoever had sent it knew exactly where I was. They knew Daniel was with me. They knew what I wasn't supposed to do. Don't say anything to your son. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice, though my chest was tightening like a vice. "So, how's the experiment coming along?" I asked, each word weighted down by the effort it took not to scream. He brightened, his fork lifted mid-air, gravy dripping unnoticed onto the tablecloth. "It's almost perfect," he said, launching into another description of chemical reactions, of measuring the ingredients just right to control the explosion. His voice was steady, oblivious, brimming with teenage excitement. And all I could think was, someone somewhere is watching us right now. My gaze flicked to the window behind him. The blinds were drawn, but not tightly. A thin slit revealed a strip of the night outside, a patch of darkness punctuated by the faint halo of a street lamp. Was there movement beyond it? A car parked too long, a shadow shifting. My eyes darted away before he could catch the paranoia in them. The phone sat between us like a live grenade, its black glass reflecting the faint amber glow of the dining room light. I couldn't bring myself to turn it over again, not yet. My heart stuttered in uneven beats, each one louder than the last, as though trying to warn me before my brain could make sense of the danger. Daniel laughed, an easy, unguarded sound. It should have been comforting, but it only twisted the knife deeper. His laughter meant innocence, trust, a complete lack of awareness. And the message told me that ignorance was the only thing keeping him safe. I forced myself to nod along, My lips stretched into something that might pass for a smile if he looked closely enough. But inside, panic clawed its way up, scratching against my ribs, demanding release. I wanted to reach across the table and grip his hand. I wanted to whisper, "We need to go, sweetheart. Don't ask why." But the warning replayed in my head like a metronome, set to panic. Don't say anything to your son. Every instinct screamed at me to protect him, but how do you shield your child when you don't even know from what? I took a sip of water to steady my hands, but the glass tapped too hard against my teeth. I set it down, hoping he wouldn't notice. He didn't. His head was bent over his plate, carving another piece of chicken, mumbling to himself about measurements and test runs. The ordinariness of the moment, the smell of food, the scrape of cutlery, the hum of the refrigerator, felt obscene against the chaos unraveling inside me. It was as though two realities were colliding at once, the safe cocoon of our dinner and the invisible threat pressing in from the shadows. My eyes flicked again to the phone. It lay there, silent now, but its presence was louder than any alarm. The message pulsed in my head, each word cutting deeper. Get up. Leave now. Don't say anything to your son. And suddenly, even the simple act of breathing felt dangerous. I forced a smile, though my lips quivered as though they no longer belonged to me. My voice cracked when I told Daniel I needed to step into the kitchen for a moment. He barely looked up, too busy chasing down the last bite of chicken with his fork. My chest burned as I stood, every movement feeling rehearsed, brittle, wrong. Then my phone buzzed again, a vibration that seemed to rattle through my bones. My hand trembled as I turned it over, and there it was. Hurry. Window of 2 minutes. I read it twice, each word pounding harder into my chest, until I felt as though my ribcage might splinter. 2 minutes. Whoever this was, they weren't just bluffing. They weren't making guesses from some anonymous distance. They knew. They knew I had stalled. They knew Daniel was still at the table. They knew every second I hesitated brought us closer to something I couldn't yet see, but already feared. My stomach twisted violently, as if trying to purge the dread clawing its way up my throat. I forced myself to breathe, to scan the room with a new set of eyes, eyes that searched not for comfort but for threats. The open blinds, tilted just slightly, suddenly looked like gaping wounds in the walls. The shadows outside seemed thicker than they had any right to be, too still, too patient. Then I saw it, a faint red dot trembling on the far wall above the framed family photo. For a moment I told myself it was nothing, maybe the reflection of a passing car, a toy, a trick of light. But my heart flipped violently, sending a shudder through every limb, as my mind locked onto the possibility I had been trying to ignore. It could be a scope, a rifle, a silent eye watching us, finger tightening on a trigger. I swallowed the terror down hard enough to hurt and forced my voice to steady. "Danny, sweetheart, why don't you grab your project notes from your backpack and show me?" I asked, as if I genuinely cared about vinegar and baking soda right then. My smile was brittle, my throat tight, but my tone had to be casual, unshaken. If he sensed anything, he might ask questions, stall, or worse, look toward the window. He blinked in confusion, but after a second's pause, he nodded and ran toward the living room, his footsteps light and careless. I didn't waste that second. The moment his back was turned, I moved. I seized the keys from the counter with a hand that shook so badly they nearly slipped through my fingers. I whispered a prayer I couldn't even finish, my lips trembling around broken words. When Daniel returned, waving a notebook, I grabbed him by the arm before his smile had even formed. "We're going for ice cream," I said too brightly, my voice an octave higher than it should have been. The words rang false even to my own ears, the kind of cheerfulness that sounded like a mask. His eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, suspicion sparking. But he was 15, still too willing to believe in small, pleasant surprises. He shrugged, sliding his notebook back into his backpack without a second thought. We walked to the door. Every inch closer felt like crossing a minefield. My ears roared with the phantom sound of a rifle crack that hadn't yet come. I twisted the knob, praying my hands didn't betray the panic coursing through me, and pulled the door open. The cool air rushed in first, brushing across my face like a warning, sharp and metallic. Daniel stepped through, the backpack bouncing against his shoulder. I followed, my body coiled tight, as though expecting a shot to split the silence at any moment. The door clicked shut behind us. The weight of that sound was enormous, final, definitive, like a gavel falling. My phone vibrated again. My pulse lurched as I pulled it from my pocket, nearly fumbling it onto the porch. Good. Don't go back inside. The words weren't instructions this time. They were confirmation. Whoever this was, they had seen us. They knew we had left. My breath caught as the implication cut deeper. The house wasn't safe. Maybe it had never been. I gripped Daniel's hand tighter than I should have, and he winced, looking up at me with wide, questioning eyes. But I couldn't soften my grip, not yet. The night around us felt wrong, too silent, too watchful. Even the breeze that rustled the leaves carried an edge of menace, as though it might whisper our position to someone waiting in the shadows. I wanted to look back at the house, to reassure myself it was still there, untouched, whole. But fear locked my gaze forward. If I looked back, I might see what I wasn't ready to face. So I walked. Each step down the porch stairs echoed with dread, every shift of gravel beneath our shoes a drumbeat counting down from an invisible clock. My heart thundered in my ears, so loud I was certain Daniel could hear it. He tugged lightly at my arm, confused. I pasted on another too bright smile, my jaw aching from the effort. "Ice cream," I whispered again, though the word cracked like dry glass in my throat. The house loomed behind us, silent now, its windows like black, unblinking eyes. And every nerve in my body screamed that we had only just escaped something that was still in there, waiting. The highway unspooled in a dull gray ribbon beneath the tires, lane markers flicking past like the steady tick of a metronome I couldn't silence. I kept my eyes pinned to the road, though the world tunneled at the edges. The dashboard lights looked too bright, the radio too loud even though it was off. Daniel asked questions. Where were we going? Why had we left in the middle of dinner? Did I forget about his homework? And I fed him soft, useless words. Just a minute. I'll explain soon. We're okay. Lies with a mother's heartbeat behind them. My knuckles calcified around the steering wheel until they creaked. A new buzz against my thigh. An address, 4 blunt lines, and a zip code. A diner at the far edge of town. The kind of place that lived under buzzing neon and smelled perpetually of coffee and fryer oil. Against all sense, I turned off the main road and went. I parked with the nose of the car facing the street, a habit I didn't know I had. The diner's sign sputtered in pink and blue, the E in diner flickering like a tired eyelid. Inside, the air was thick with burnt coffee and syrup. A bell over the door chirped, too cheerful for the mood that walked in with us. The linoleum tiles, chessboard black and white, had been scrubbed to obedience, though grease shadows lingered in the grout. A waitress with a name tag that said CAR glanced up and gave a mechanical smile that didn't notice the tremor in my right hand as I steered Daniel toward the counter. "Grab a stool, bud," I said, pressing a kiss against his temple that felt like sealing a letter I might never mail. "Milkshake? I'll be right over." He gave me the face he saved for my sudden bursts of affection, half eye roll, half secret warmth, and slid onto a cracked red stool. I watched him pick up a laminated menu and bend it into a soft S-curve, an anxious habit he didn't know he had inherited. Carol drifted toward him with a pad and a pencil, the universal choreography of small American hunger. I turned toward the back booth. There he was, Michael, Daniel's father, my ex-husband, the man who had fallen out of our lives when our son was 6, a vanishing act that still rattled in our cabinets like a ghost dish. He had chosen the booth that faced the door, back to the wall, a clear view to both exits. The old instincts he once called paranoid had finally found a home that didn't look like bravado. His face had thinned into hard lines. The boyish glow he used to carry like a joke had been sanded off. His eyes were hollowed, not dead but scoured, like something had burned too close for too long. A coffee mug sat in front of him, untouched, a black mirror beneath the neon stutter. "I had to warn you," he said as I slid in, the vinyl issuing a tired sigh. "No hello, no apology, no house school." He was past preamble, living on nouns and verbs. They know about me. And now they know about you. A muscle jumped in my jaw. The diner sounds, the low radio murmur, the dish clatter, the hiss of the grill, fell into a dull, pressurized hum as anger rose behind my ribs, the way steam builds in a sealed pot. He had left us with a note that said he would make it right. He had left me holding rent and questions. He had left a 6-year-old staring down hallways that no longer ended in a father. And now, after all the elastic years and late-night explanations and birthdays with empty chairs, he was pulling us into the undertow of his unfinished business. "Warn me about what?" I asked. The words came out sharpened to a whisper, steel dragged across stone. He glanced past my shoulder, a quick scan of the room, then leaned in until I could smell the coffee he hadn't drunk. "I stole something," he said, voice scraping low. "Information. The kind people kill for because it looks like numbers until it detonates a life. They've been watching you to get to me." He slid a USB drive across the table. Not dramatic, not theatrical. It came out of his sleeve like a sleight of hand he practiced 100 times. The casing was dull metal, no logo, a nick along one edge like a scar that had learned to stay closed. It clicked against the laminate with a sound that felt louder than the bell on the door. This is why. My stomach dropped as if the booth had shifted on its bolts. Heat flushed my neck, then receded, leaving a cold sweat in its wake. I didn't reach for the drive. I didn't want it to know my temperature. "What did you take?" I asked. "And from whom?" His mouth pressed into a line, the old stubbornness showing up in profile. "From a company that calls itself a consulting firm when it's really a laundry. Contracts, shell vendors, procurement fraud, slush routed through charities that exist in name only. I built part of the pipeline 5 years ago." The admission landed with its own gravity. Walked away when I saw the bleed. I figured if I left, the machine would grind without me and forget my name. I was wrong. I thought of Daniel at the counter, legs too long for his stool, sneaker tips cuffing the chrome, a milkshake sweating on the napkin. I thought of the text, "Don't say anything to your son." The space around my anger sharpened. It didn't dim. "Why us?" I asked. "Why watch us?" "Because you were the cleanest lever," he said, the words falling hard, like he had rehearsed the pain of saying them. "I burned assets when I took the data. The easiest pressure point left was the family of a man who vanished. They expected me to run to you. They expected me to trade what I had for the 2 of you. And for a while He stopped, swallowed, reassembled. I didn't. I stayed dark. I thought I could keep you safer by staying gone." "You were wrong," I said. My voice didn't rise. It cooled. A shadow skimmed across his face as the neon hiccoughed. For a second, the mask of composure slipped, and I saw pure fear, quick and naked. "I know," he said. "I know how many nights I cost you. I know what Daniel asked you that you couldn't answer. I know every birthday present that turned into silence. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm telling you the board has shifted, and you're on it." He gestured cautiously toward the drive. "Those files are names and dates and routes. It looks like accounting, but it's a map. You'll see cross keys, two-factor logs, internal approvals, things that can't be faked at scale. If I release it without cover, I die loud. If I sit on it, you die quiet. I'm done pretending there's a third door." He reached for the coffee, changed his mind, retreated. The tremor in his hands wasn't theatrical. It was small and constant, like a hidden motor. He wore no ring. The indent where it used to be was gone, skin healed to a blank. "You could have told me years ago," I said, and felt the old argument flare to life like a match struck in a dry room. "You could have chosen us over your crusade, or at least let me choose with you." "I did choose you," he said, and to his credit, he didn't try to make it noble. "In the only way I knew how, by becoming a ghost ugly enough to keep you from looking for me." It wasn't an apology. It was a diagnosis. Behind him, a mirror the size of a door reflected the diner in a strip of aluminum brightness. The glaze of pie under glass, the curved backs of booths, Daniel at the counter drawing lines through condensation with his finger. In the reflection, I looked composed. That version of me could have been any woman meeting any man for the exchange of any unremarkable heartbreak. But the table between us held a different narrative. A thumb drive the color of trouble, a man with the edges burned off, a woman measuring the cost of staying seated. "Look at me," I said. He did. The first time he truly met my eyes since I'd sat down. "If anything touches our son because of you, if a rumor brushes him, if a stranger says his name with the wrong kind of knowledge, I will use whatever is on that drive to salt the earth around you, and around the people you're afraid of, and around anyone who ever helped them." He nodded, not as a man who had been threatened, but as one who had just received terms he understood. "That's why I asked you to come," he said. "Because you're the only person I trust to hate me enough to do what has to be done." Heat gathered again at my sternum, not the flash of panic, but the steady burn of rage finding oxygen. I slid the USB closer, the metal whispering across laminate, and stopped short of touching it. It was heavier than it looked, even sitting still. Its weight changed the table. "How dare you?" I said, not shouted, not whispered. A clean, surgical cut. "How dare you vanish and then drag us here, into your mess, as if we existed only as leverage?" A silence fell between us, shaped like a verdict. He didn't contest it. He held my stare and let the words do their work. The bell over the door chirped again. Someone laughed 3 booths up. Carol called "Order up" to no one in particular. Ordinary life kept happening, loud as thunder. Michael breathed out, slow. "You're right," he said. "I deserve the hate. Keep it. Aim it. Just don't let it keep you from seeing what this is." His gaze flicked, just once, toward the counter where Daniel sat, straw between his teeth, oblivious to the tectonic shift happening 20 feet away. The drive waited on the table, small as a lozenge, poisonous as a promise. I didn't pick it up. Not yet. I let it sit there and radiate the shape of our next breath, our next fight, our next choice. My hands lay flat on the formica, palms cool, ring biting faintly into skin, as if to remind me of the difference between weight and anchor. I looked at Michael and let my anger finish standing up inside me. The booth sighed, the neon fluttered, and time arranged itself into narrow, exacting lines. I wanted to scream. The impulse rose like fire in my throat, begging to be released in the form of words sharp enough to cut him open with everything he had left unsaid over the years. I wanted to walk away, to turn my back and let the chaos he had created consume him alone. I wanted to take that USB drive, the little sliver of metal that now seemed heavier than a loaded weapon, and hurl it into his face, let it clang across the sticky diner floor, shatter his brittle attempt at redemption. But the image of the red dot on my wall flashed again in my mind, a perfect circle of threat, silent but merciless, painted across my life without permission. And then Daniel's eyes, the wide, confused look he had given me when I gripped his arm too tightly, when I lied through my teeth about ice cream. That expression carved itself into my chest with an edge sharper than anything Michael could have said. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. It was about keeping my son alive, safe, untouched by the games of men who played with shadows and left their families to pay the debts. My hand hovered for only a second before I took the drive. The metal was cold, slick with condensation from the diner's air, and for a brief moment I felt as though it pulsed with its own heartbeat. I shoved it into my purse with the kind of finality that felt like slamming a vault door shut. I looked at Michael, my voice a rasp but steady. "You will fix this," I said, every syllable sharpened into a blade. "For him. Not for me. For him." He flinched as though the words had weight. Good. Let him carry them like stones in his pockets until he drowned in them. The hours that followed blurred into a grim, grinding rhythm. Federal agents arrived, shadows in plain clothes with the quiet efficiency of men and women who knew danger better than routine. The diner emptied in silence, customers ushered out under the guise of a gas leak, the neon sign flickering against the polished barrels of guns hidden beneath coats. They surrounded us without ceremony, their presence both terrifying and, in some twisted way, relieving. Michael had finally made contact, burned the last of his bridges to reach them. And in that moment, our survival no longer felt like a desperate gamble played in the dark. We were taken to a safe house, a drab government building that smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. Inside, under the humming fluorescence, the pieces began to assemble. The drive contained proof of everything Michael had confessed: contracts, shell companies, transaction logs, the veins of a corporate crime syndicate pumping money into black veins that led everywhere and nowhere. The kind of evidence that could topple empires if held up to the light. And we, Daniel and I, had been leverage. Bait in a game I had never agreed to play. The text messages hadn't come from the faceless threat I'd imagined crouching outside our window. They had come from an undercover agent watching our house, waiting for the right moment to extract us before the noose tightened. My fear had been real, but so had the protection circling us in silence. Relief washed over me in waves so strong my knees nearly buckled. Each breath I drew seemed borrowed, shaky, fragile, but alive. The weight of what could have been, the bullet that hadn't been fired, the door that hadn't splintered, the scream that hadn't torn itself from my throat, pressed down on me until I nearly collapsed under the enormity of absence. Not what had happened, but what had almost happened. I sat across from Daniel in the sterile brightness of the room, his milkshake long forgotten, his backpack slumped against his chair. He looked smaller than he had at the counter in the diner, his shoulders hunched, his hands restless in his lap. Yet when he reached for me, his grip was steady, strong. His fingers laced through mine with an urgency that felt both protective and desperate. His voice broke the silence, low but unwavering. "Mom, you kept me safe. That's all that matters." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and unrelenting, threatening to undo the dam I had built inside myself for years, for birthdays celebrated in half-light, for questions I could never answer about his father, for nights I whispered reassurances I didn't fully believe. I looked at him, my son, my anchor, the only pure thing to have come from the wreckage of my past with Michael, and I realized he was right. I had kept him safe. Against every unknown shadow, every invisible eye pressed against our glass, every bullet that might have been chambered, I had held the line. And in his gaze, I saw something I hadn't let myself believe in for a long time: trust. For the first time in years, I let the air fill my lungs without flinching. For the first time in years, I believed that maybe I wasn't just surviving by accident. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed him.